tradition, feel so alive. Summer rhythms flame with a thrive. Go, 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 oh, shout it aloud. Hear the summer sun, we're a summer-loving crowd. Talking Brazil ball, we're breaking it down. Bringing the passion.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Talking Brazil Ball, the podcast all about Brazilian football. We're here for another episode of Season 2, back to look at the 2025 Serie A season, or at least the run-up to it. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, George. And George, last week we looked at the promoted sides. Well, first of all, how are you? And why don't you let the listeners know what we're going to be looking at in today's episode?
Yeah, okay, James. Yeah, hello to everybody. Hello to the listeners. Hello to you, James. Como vai? To you, how are you? And yeah, I'm doing okay, James. Looking forward to another episode today. We're looking at, like you said, we looked at the promotion sides last week. This week, we are looking at the title contenders. So we're looking at 4 teams who we think might challenge for the Brasileirão 2025 title in this one. So, yeah, 4 teams, 2 each. We picked 2 each. And I think we're just going to have a rundown and how we think it's going to go for these teams in the 2025 edition of the Serie A. So that's how it is. How are you doing?
Yeah, fine. Thank you. Looking forward to another week. Like you said, looking at some challenges, and I think people can probably guess a few of them before we even reveal our title challenges. We picked the 2 kind of individually, but, you know, there's only so many you can pick as a title challenger. We haven't really gone with a curveball, although we might touch on a couple who could come into the conversation as well. But yeah, generally good, and been enjoying the week of football as always. Liverpool crashed out of the FA Cup, which was a bit of a disappointment, but in the long run that might do us some good. And you're jetting off after the game, aren't you? After the pod to watch Leeds, maybe put another 3 points on the board.
Yes, I'm jetting off from the chair here to the chair over there, and going to watch the game. Yes, and hopefully we will. I mean, we like yourselves, we bowed out the cup on Saturday, so it was a disappointing performance. But the way I see the FA Cup, James, we're not going to win the cup, so let's get out. We're gunning for promotion. We need another 3 points on the board tonight. Let's hope the boys get it in these sort of games this season. We do seem to have done better. It's a bit of a stinky one for me, I must admit, but these sort of away games are on a Tuesday evening. But let's see, from my point of view, hopefully Leeds come away with 3 points this evening.
Yeah, we'll see. And before we do get into the show, the meat of the show for today, I believe you've just knocked up a quiz, haven't you, George, to kick things off as usual?
Yeah, I have, James. Almost forgot, to be quite honest with you today, but I just remembered just as we're about to hit the record button that, yes, I do need to think of a quiz. So quickly, I did knock one up. And this is it. Obviously, we're looking at the title contenders, James, for this year's Brasileirão campaign. One of these I will let slip, which one it is. Obviously, from the thumbnail, actually, if you're watching on YouTube, you probably already guessed. One of them is Flamengo, of course. James finished in a disappointing third position last season, 9 points off eventual winners Botafogo. So my question surrounds them. They last won the Serie A title in 2020, James. But what I want to know is which current manager managing in the Serie A, oversaw that title win. So he's currently managing in Brazil, in the top flight of Brazil. He oversaw Flamengo's 2020 title win. Who was it?
I should know this as well because we played them. We played them in the Club World Cup, so I should know this. But I can't think who it was. It wasn't Kuka?
No,
I don't know. I can't remember. I can't remember. Oh, no. Go on.
It was one of my favourites, James, Mr. Rogério Ceni.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, he came in very late on in that campaign, oversaw the title win by a point. In the end, they won it by a point. Inter was second. Flamengo won it up by a point. And yeah, Seni was the manager from November 2020 to July of 2021. So he wasn't there very long, really, but he came in at the very last and, won them the title.
Yeah, so it was the year before, sorry, that we played them, 2019, wasn't it? And I think it was, I don't remember, I thought it was George Jesus just before that, but I can't remember who it was, to be quite. Oh, it was George Jesus, yeah. So fair play to Seni. He's, I know, one of your favourites, as you said. That was a good little tidbit, and obviously they've got a new manager in place for this season as well. Or, well, relatively new. He did finish the last campaign, but that's all to look forward to. George, like you said, Flamengo, one of the teams we are going to look at, and I believe actually that the Talking Brazil Ball band have knocked up a little tune again ahead of this show to reveal who the others are going to be, if you can make it out from the singing. So should we give that a little tinkle? We had some good fun with the tune last week, didn't we? And we turned around another one. So
yeah, I mean, like you said, I asked them and they provided one. So I was, it's let's see if you quite fancy it as much as you did the last one, and the viewers and the listeners as well. Let us know what your thoughts are on this particular tune.
Yeah, it's a banger. It's another banger.
It is.
George, that is, I don't know. We'll have to see whether it tops the last week's hit. I know there's a long song on the back of that, but I'm not going to play the whole thing. But as I said there, Botafogo, Palmeiras, Flamengo, International, they're the four we're looking at. And I think with what we said, George, we're going to go in the order in which they finished the last year's season. So, I mean, if you didn't know that it was Botafogo coming up first, then where have you been? They did, of course, lift the Brasileirão title in 2024 for the first time in, I think, 29 years, wasn't it? Or something, I think it was 29 years, and as part of a glorious double under Artur Jorge. But, George, I mean, the listeners may not know. If you've been keeping up to date with things, then you will have done. I think we did mention it briefly last week. But Botafogo, you're going to take Botafogo, aren't you, first of all? And, they've changed the manager, haven't they? So, first of all, who has come in? Who is the new manager of Botafogo, and how are they preparing for the new season? And where do you see the season going for them this time? They'd be going some to replicate it, wouldn't they?
Oh, they absolutely would, James. And like you said, you were right in saying, obviously, Artur Jorge, miraculously decided, I think it was off his own back, that he didn't want to be the manager anymore. I think he's gone to Qatar, hasn't he? We did mention at the back end of last week, I wonder why, you thought maybe it was the weather, but I don't know, because the weather is already nice in Brazil, isn't it? So, most of the time. But yeah, look, Artur Jorge obviously has gone to Qatar, and, they're gonna actually struggle to find a coach here before they start the season. I think they haven't yet found one. Mr. Texora, we know he's a little bit eccentric. He is taking his time with the search, but I will just give you a few of the names mentioned, James. Here, there is quite a star-studded list of suitors. So the people in the list are Hardin, Marcos Vascos Matos, Mr. Rafa Benitez, Roberto Mancini, Tite, and Tata Martino. They're the ones that I think are at this moment being, tipped as the next coach. But we know that John Textor is taking his time in sort of picking out this coach, because Artur Jorge is a massive miss. He really is. Look, he's just supplied Fogo with the first title, like you said, in 29 years, and a Libertadores to go and to boot as well. So he was a big part of it. I said it last season, James. I think he is the best. He was the best in the league last season, the best manager. And I think they will have to go some to to replicate that and for the next manager to replicate what he did. At the moment in charge, interim charge, is a man called Carlos Lee Ria, who is a 41-year-old, sort of mainly, he's done a lot of youth coaching, James. He came initially as an under-20 coach, and he's now been thrust into the sort of interim manager position. And I don't think he's kind of taken to the role quite too well, really. They've been a little bit kind of hit and miss in the sort of the regional competitions. And they lost recently to Maduria RJ, which I'm not sure of their positioning. They're in, actually, I don't know what league they're in, to be honest, but it was a home defeat for Fogo the other night, so Sunday evening. So yeah, I don't think they're really, I don't know, they're a bit hit and miss, really, and I don't think he knows that he's not going to get the job. For me, they've lost a couple of players as well, James. I'd missed this, and I think you had as well, hadn't you, really? But there was a lot of talk about Luis Enrique going to the Premier League. I know Villa, I know Newcastle were also linked with him, but he's ended up going to Russia, James, with Zenit St. Petersburg, which is a bit of a surprise, really, given the sort of stock that he has built. He's now in a Brazilian international. He had a fantastic season last season, really, 12 goals in all, 7 in the Serie A. He was doing really well for a time. And a little bit of a strange move for me for Henrique, to be quite honest, given that he did have suitors in the Premier League and in the higher up kind of leagues in Europe as well. So, Thiago Almada has gone to Lyon. I think we all knew that was going to happen anyway, but he was a star turn in the title win last season as well. Also, which I'm quite excited about, I must admit, Junior Santos has made the move to my team, Garlo, James. Didn't have a big part to play in the title win, but he had a massive part to play in the Libertadores win, 10 goals in all, in them eventually winning the title. And he scored, of course, he sealed the game in the very last minutes of the final as well with that 3-1 win over Garlo. So he's now moved to Garlo. So I'm quite excited about that. I think he's a good player, Santos. So, like we were discussing, they've lost some, quite big players there. Taquino Soares has gone to Santos as well. I know he didn't have much of a big sort of part to play in, he played quite a number of games actually, but I don't think he started too many last season, but he's moved to Santos as well. So they've lost a few. In terms of getting players in, can't really say there's a great deal. There is a double swoop from Zenit, so they've done a lot of business with Zenit over the last over the winter period. Artur Guimarães and the man Wendell, the centre mid, have both come back to Brazil from Zenit. Artur Guimarães was once a Brazilian, called up to the Brazilian national side, last played in Brazil for Palmeiras in 2023. Wendell, well, he's 10 years since he played back in his home country of Brazil. Came through at Fluminense, did Wendell, before making the move to Portugal with Sporting Lisbon. Leandro Link from Paranense, relegated Paranense. He's probably the other pick of the the winter business, really. Others kind of like youth players, really. They have signed one man of today as of recording. Ja Filo from Santos. He's a young centre back, so I don't know how much he'll feature with Fogo. But for me, I think they'll struggle slightly, to be quite honest. And not struggle, but I think they will struggle to definitely hit the heights of last season. Given the kind of late notice of the manager coming in, it's now about 6 weeks away from the league beginning. So it's not the best of preparations, and I see them probably coming, fourth, fifth kind of thing, I think.
Yeah, like I said, it'd be really hard for them to do what they've done last season. But I know the way the football fan thinks is not to look back and think, well, that was great, wasn't it? You always want more, and you're always looking for. You're only as good as your last season, aren't you? So if they go on to bomb this season, then Textor, I'm sure the fans will be out for him a little bit as well. Like you said there, I mean, they've lost so much firepower. Luis Enrique was arguably the best player in Brazil. I know he was. I don't know if he did win Serie A Player of the Year. I think he might have done. He'd certainly won the Libertadores MVP, didn't he? And he had played a big part in the final. Bit of a shame to see him go to Russia. I know we might touch on with Flamengo as well. It looks like one of their young players, Loran, who didn't really hit the heights last year, but we spoke about, he's going to CSKA Moscow. So there's been, they do tend to do quite a lot of business with Russia and also the Ukrainian club Shakhtar. We know that Kao Elias from Fluminense has gone there. So they tend to do that business, but it is a bit of a surprise, and you do feel like either he'll move to Europe again maybe, or he'll perhaps return to Brazil, as a couple of those boys have done from Zenit as well this season. But my question to you, George, just to round off on Botafogo, is you mentioned the managerial shortlist there. I think that Rafa Benitez has bowed out of that. I think he, as he often does, Rafa, he seems to hold talks with a lot of clubs and then he can't quite see eye to eye with him. Him and Textor would have been probably box office. Rafa doesn't pull any punches. He always seems to fall out with his clubs. So I don't think that he's in the running anymore, to be honest, from what I saw over the last couple of days. But of the ones remaining there, who do you think they will go for, and who do you think they should go for, basically?
Well, for me, James, I'm a fan of Tite. I wouldn't look past Tite, to be honest with you, James. He's got credentials. Obviously, former manager of the national side. Everybody knows who he is, and I think he would be the next kind of box office for me. I know Rafa, it would have been, in terms of fireworks, would have been quite fun to watch. I know you're obviously, and right, so very fond of Rafa Benitez. From what he's given, from what he did for your club, but he does seem to fall out very quickly with people, and he's probably not everybody's cup of tea. I think Textor is, like I said, quite eccentric in himself, and he probably would end up, it would end up quite fireworks, and I don't think that wouldn't go down very well at all with the Fogo fans, and it would end up being a quite treacherous and disastrous season for them. But I think Tite, you'd be in safe hands with him. And I think he'd run a tight ship. I think they do quite well. But I do think that, the likes of Palmeiras, who I know you'll speak about in momentarily, and I think Flamengo as well, I think they'll be out for blood, to be honest with you, James, this season. I think they'll be gunning hard for Fogo if they're still at the top. I expect Palmeiras and Flamengo to improve quite heavily on what they did last season.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I don't think we'll give a prediction in this show. I think we'll leave that for the season preview. This is just kind of going and looking at what those contenders have been doing. But Fogo, too much disruption perhaps. A lot of change, some good players going, but they do still have some good players there. The man just over your shoulder there, Jorge Igor Jesus, will be heavily relied upon, and the man on the other shoulder, perhaps Alan, who didn't really have much of a role last season, might come into things a bit more. And they've still got Savarino and those kind of players as well who can make a difference. So wouldn't rule them out just yet, but it's going to be a big ask for Fogo, certainly. And like you said, George, let's move on quickly to the team who were runners-up last season, 6 points behind in the end, with Palmeiras, ended their back-to-back league title run, so they were going for a third in a row. And as often happens in any league, really, it's tricky to win 3 in a row, and Palmeiras ultimately couldn't do it, but they did manage to come second. A very mixed season, you'd have to say, for Palmeiras, and the fans will be expecting a lot better this time around. They haven't made a change of manager, George, so Abel Ferreira is still there, despite his kind of eccentricities last year. He had a very, very up and down season in terms of temperament, seemed to be fighting with a lot of people a lot of the time, felt like the whole world was out to get him. But they weren't. He's still there. He's being given the chance to lead Palmeiras back to where they feel that they belong this year. But to be quite honest, things aren't going well for them. I mean, we don't really go too much into these regional tournaments because, there's so many games in them, and a lot of the games are mismatches that, teams playing first and second, third division teams. So, but Palmeiras, Georgia, is worth mentioning their form because they are they would be expected to win the Paulista, really. There's Corinthians in there, obviously, Sao Paulo, Santos as well, but they are the better team in Sao Paulo. But George, they're third, so the Paulista is split into 4 different groups of 4 teams, and they're in Group D this time alongside Sao Bernardo, Ponte Preta, and Velo Club, who are obviously, we know none of them are first division sides, but Palmeiras are third in that table after 8 games, having won 3, drawn 4, and lost 1. So 13 points. They are only 3 points off the top. But, looking at the standard of those teams, you'd expect them to absolutely batter everything in front of them, and they just haven't done that. So it's been disappointing, and it has followed on from obviously what was a disappointing end to last season. In terms of business, you have to say that they have tried to strengthen from the business that they've done. But Paulinho has come in, George, who I know you were quite critical of last season from Gallo. Obviously didn't quite hit the heights that he did in 2023. And unfortunately, he's come in and got injured straight away. So he hasn't made his debut for them yet. It looks like he's going to be out for another couple of months. He's going to miss the start of the season. So that doesn't really bode well. He was the biggest signing. I'm not sure how much it was, but it was, I think, about 18 million or something like that. It wasn't a cheap deal. With Gallo, so he'd be expected to bring a bit more firepower. And as we know, Estevão Willian is going to be leaving Palmeiras in over the summertime, so he'll play half a season. So Paulinho might be the man who's really tasked with kind of being handed the baton and following on from him. But it's not started well for him in that respect. Paulinho. They've also brought in, which I think is a really interesting signing, Facundo Torres from Orlando. I know that he is a Uruguayan winger. He's very highly rated, George, in America for what he's been doing in Orlando. I know that he's been a really key figure for them, Orlando City. 24 years old, like I said, Uruguayan international, came through at Peñarol, Montevideo side. So for me, that's a really good signing. That looks more a better signing almost than Paulinho, because I feel like he can be a real star. I think Facundo Torres, he's one to watch, I would say, George. They've also brought another chap in, Emiliano Martinez, not the goalkeeper from Aston Villa, but a chap from FC Midtjylland in Denmark, who are obviously a very good youth development. This guy isn't that young. He's 25, centre mid, another Uruguayan international, actually. So they're going down the Uruguayan route. So, in my opinion, a good couple of bits of business. I don't know what your opinion is on Paulinho in particular. Like I said, I know you weren't his biggest fan last year. What's your reaction to Gallo selling him to a potential title rival if they can get their act together?
Yeah, a bit of surprise, really, James, if I'm being quite honest. I know Paulinho, he's had a decent career, really, obviously, in Europe as well with Leverkusen, so he was there for a few years, wasn't he? And he didn't score too many, but
didn't make an impact.
Not really. And when he came back, I think, like you said, in 2023, he was the man for Gallo, really. Couldn't hit the heights. Only 4 goals in the Brasileirão last season. Obviously, we know Gallo, just absolutely tanked it in the end, and hung the hat on all the cup competitions. In the end, ended up with nothing, but ended up just scraping, continental competition for next year. Paulinho. So yeah, I'm very surprised that Paulinho has made, for Palmeiras, who will be challenging for the title. I don't think that Abel Ferreira will see out the season. I think it'll become a little bit too, like you said, they haven't started too well in the in the regional competitions. I think it's kind of the beginning of the end a little bit for Ferreira, to be quite honest. And I don't actually see them. I don't think they'll be. I don't know. The way they are now, I don't think they're going to be that close to it. They'll be close to it because they always are, kind of thing, in recent times. But I don't think they're, maybe, like I said, it's the beginning and the end, really, for Ferreira. Paulinho, injured straight away, just kind of puts the dampener on it straight away, doesn't it? Which we see it so often. You get a new club and then you get injured straight away. So, like you said, Facundo Torres is quite an exciting one. So we'll have to wait and see how he does. But yeah, it's a bit of a surprise to me to see them plumb for such an out of form striker, really.
I think you're being harsh on him. I think he's a good player, and I think he'll be a good signing for them. I liked him at Leverkusen. I mean, I'm a bit biased in that I had a Football Manager saved by Leverkusen while Paulinho was there, and he was unbelievable for me. So, but I do think he's a good player. I think you're being a bit harsh on him, to be honest. I think he's going to prove you wrong once he gets back to fitness.
Fair enough. Well, I hope he does. You know what I mean. But from what I saw last season, obviously with my team, he was poor, and I think, yeah, who knows? But like I said, and it seems quite a lot of money to splash really on him. But then again, he is only 24, so he's still a relatively fairly young striker. When he was at Leverkusen, he would have been very young. So we'll wait and see. There's still time for him yet to turn. It was a bad season. You're not made off one bad season, are you? So maybe I'm being a little slightly harsh on him, but I was very disappointed with how he did really last season. But there you go. The whole team we're not great, like we know. I think I'm tipping my team for a little bit better this time round.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to wait and see. Gallo have as well bolstered their ranks from Palmeiras. It's worth saying. Gabriel Menino, who himself is only 24, defensive midfielder, played a lot for Palmeiras over the years. Actually, nearly 250 games, even though he's only 24. Has joined Gallo as a defensive midfielder. So that looks like a good signing for them. So he's obviously gone out. This Emiliano Martinez was perhaps a replacement for him in Ferreira's team. Also, George, of course, the big news with Palmeiras, the big exit was Vitor Rice, who we spoke at length about last season. Broke into the team through the youth ranks of Palmeiras, stood out immediately, got a goal on his debut, didn't he? And never really looked back from that point. Kept in the team. Didn't play every game, but was playing pretty heavily. And obviously attracted, as we know, he was always attracting the eyes of the biggest teams in Europe. And in the end, he's gone to Manchester City, made his debut this weekend against Leyton Orient, which is a bit of a tough place to go and make your debut at if you're an 18-year-old centre-back. But he did all right. I watched a bit of that game. He did fine. And he's obviously gone. I think that's the model, isn't it, for almost every team in Brazil? When you get a young player like this, Palmeiras know it better than most. Obviously, they're going to have it again with Estevao. You bring them through, and then you're going to lose them. So you do have to plan ahead, and it'll be interesting to see who they do fill in with that in that defence. But yeah, your reaction as well, please, if you would, to Vitor Rice. Not so much him leaving, because we knew that was probably going to happen, but his choice of destination.
Yeah, I'm kind of excited to see how he does. I mean, it's a massive transfer. Like you said, he only made his debut, burst on the scene with a goal, and he's, like you said, he's not looked back. He's managed to get himself, he's made his career there. He's made himself, he's secured financially, if anything else, through such a massive transfer to such a, obviously a man-made team, really, but it's a very successful one. Good luck to him. It wouldn't have, if I was to advise him, obviously he doesn't want my advice, but I probably wouldn't have advised him to go to Man City, to be quite honest. But, that's his choice. I think he'll find it very hard to get football. I know Ake is injured at this moment, and he likes to play John Stones or whatever, up further up the pitch. But Ruben Diaz and, Guardaval, what's his name?
Gvardiol.
Yeah, him. Obviously he's probably in front of him as well, even though he's naturally a left back. He can play centre back as well. There's a Kanji there as well, who's a very, very accomplished centre back. There's the lad as well coming from the Uzbekistani lad who's coming as well. So he's a year older than him. So you just think, are you really going to get above those guys in the pecking order? Probably not. Maybe not even. He's called Cruz. Yeah, I don't think he's probably ahead of Reece, isn't he, at the moment?
Yeah, he seems. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, for me, I'd have advised him not to go to Man City, but you can't blame the lad for looking at it, thinking, because a lot of the Brazilian lads, they'll see the Premier League. It's the Premier League. It's the Premier League champions. Let's go there. But ultimately for his career, I'd have said, look, lad, go somewhere else and then make the step up in a few years if you're still playing at the top level. But I mean, so I would have advised him against it. But it'll be interesting. I'm excited to see how he does, to be quite honest. But I don't think he'll play a great deal, and I don't think.
He had someone he followed in the footsteps, Gabriel Jesus as well, who came through Palmeiras, and he did actually say when he signed for City, he's been watching City since he was a kid. And although, back in our day when nobody would have been saying that, but these days, you're coming through as a young player, then probably that is the case. You've been watching City. All he's known really is City being dominating in the league and being good in the Champions League as well. So, yeah, we'll see how he does. It's a big loss for Palmeiras, but also one that they've planned for. So a bit of rocky times. We mentioned the rocky times at Botafogo. I do feel like Palmeiras are, sticking with Ferreira, but with one eye perhaps on where they're going to go once he does implode. We'll just have to see. I think the signings have been decent. I do think they have enough within that team to challenge. Ultimately, I think it will come down to the manager and where his head's at. It's certainly going to be another interesting season at the Allianz Parque, isn't it, George? Anyway, that's a top two done. I don't know whether we are tipping either of them for the title, but like I said, we'll leave that decision. We've got a little bit longer, I think, to make that decision, but just an overview of where they are at heading into things. So before we get into the next two, George, a little break at halfway. Let's get the Talking Brazil ball band back in to players into the second half of the show.
Absolutely, James. Do it.
So the second two teams on that very high-pitched version you were singing there, George, is Flamengo and Internacional. I know you were debating whether Inter were the right team to put in there, but yeah, let's park Inter anyway for now, and let's look at Flamengo. So George, they were your tip for the title last year. Obviously, that didn't happen in the end. They weren't a million miles away, down in third, 9 points off Botafogo in the end. Tite, as you mentioned there, in the running to be Botafogo manager, did start the year last year at Flamengo. He didn't end it, though, with Felipe Luis, the former left-back, coming in and taking over, winning the Copa do Brasil as well, as it turned out. So how are their plans going for the season? And is Felipe Luis still in charge, George? Has he been given the job permanently? What have you been able to find out?
Well, it's funny, isn't it, James? Like you said, they were my tip. I do like Tite. Like I said, I think Fogo should look at Tite for their next manager permanently, because I think he would be in safe hands. I think Flamengo were doing okay, really. I think he kind of left off his own accord, didn't he, in the end? Or I think it was kind of a... It was like a mutual. It was like a mute. I think they were starting to dip a little bit, but in the end, I think as far as I can see, Felipe Luis, who was appointed interim in September, I think he has been given the job permanently, James. So, from what I can gather, that does seem to be the case. And that's good for me. I think he knows the club. We all know. Yeah, he knows the club. He knows what's going on. He knows the players, and it was very much evident in that they did go on such a fairly long unbeaten run. Unbeaten since October in all competitions to end the season. So he obviously got them playing well. They did win the Brazilian Cup as well, didn't they? Thrashing Galo in the end over 2 legs. So that he's already won a bit of silverware. He'll be looking for more in 2025. And to be quite honest with you, James, I think out of the 3 that we've spoken about so far, I think Flamengo, again, I'm sort of tipping them, definitely to do better than Fogo and Palmeiras, to be honest with you. I think they look a little bit more put together than the other 2 that we've spoken about there. And yeah, I just think there has been links to the likes of Jorginho, who is at Arsenal as well. That would be quite a fantastic signing for me. In terms of business that they have actually done, they haven't done much, actually, to be fair. only 2 transfers in, but there is a big one and a name that you will know, James, of course. Danilo, the defender, who was out of contract, I think, at Juve. He has now signed on a free transfer for Flamengo. So he's at Flamengo. He was linked with Santos earlier on in the window, but he has ended up in Flamengo. So, yeah, he's kind of a big signing. The only other one is Janino, man named Janino, who has come in from Azerbaijan, Karabag. He's come from Karabag. So, yeah, we'll see how he gets on. But they're the only 2 signings. In terms of players lost, again, there isn't that many, really. I know they've lost Gabigol, gone to Cruzeiro, Fabricio Bruno as well, who was linked with West Ham last season. I think he nearly signed for West Ham, and I think it fell through in the end, but he's gone to Cruzeiro as well. Another notable departure is David Luiz, James. He's gone to Fortaleza, which is an interesting, that's a big signing for Fortaleza, really, even though he is 37 years old. He's a very experienced player. Didn't play a great deal of a part in Flamengo's season last season, really, if you look at it as a whole. Also, Carlos Alcaraz, who was, obviously at Southampton before, he's gone on loan to Everton for the remainder of the season. So he's back in the Premier League until the end of the season. So he's gone out on loan. So there's a few gone, but I'd say they were fringe players, really, like you mentioned, James. Loran is on his way to Russia as well. CSKA on the brink of signing. I think they've agreed a fee of around about 8 million euros, which seems incredibly cheap, really, for a player that is, very well highly thought of. But he didn't have a good time last season, really. But I think they'll do well, James. I do think they'll do well.
Yeah, they've certainly done some, steady business. Bruno is a bit of a surprise. I know he's very highly rated there, was in the Brazilian national team a little bit, wasn't he? And like you said, was on the verge of a move to West Ham. So to sell him to Cruzeiro, who may be somewhat of a rival this season, is a bit of a strange one. David Luiz, as you mentioned, very, very interesting to see how he gets on at Fortaleza. You'd imagine he'd be a bit of a key man, really, for Vojvoda up there. So plenty to, like you said, not loads of incoming business. Jorginho, it looks like, is going to be parked until the summer. I think Arsenal, well, obviously now the window has closed in Europe, they aren't going to let him go. I think it looks like that might be one when his contract runs out in the summer, but he can come in mid-season in Brazil and help them as well. A bit more experience in there, and they might need that experience. I think the one thing we'll say is, of course, Filipe Luis is very highly rated. One of my colleagues at GRV Media, Felipe Guedes, who's in charge of the VAMO football sites, had tipped them, actually, George, to win the title, Flamengo, this year, saying that Filipe Luis had started incredibly well. But I think it's worth mentioning that he is a very young manager. He's never taken charge of a team at the start of the season before. Things can go wrong. If things go wrong, then you wonder how he reacts. And I know he's a friend of all the players. They've been talking about how much they respect him there and everything. But, that can quickly turn sour if results don't follow. So I think Danilo, as you mentioned, has got a really big part to play. He came through, I was just having a look at America at MG, and then up to Santos. So his first time playing in Rio and first time playing for Flamengo. So, but he'll be a big player. I actually didn't realise he was playing as much as he was for Juve. I thought he'd been kind of bombed out a bit under Thiago Motta, but wasn't the case. He was playing, so he's still got a bit to offer. Very experienced Brazil international as well. So, what do you think they may need to do looking at the squad? Do you think it's balanced enough? Do you think they've got, the one thing that we said about them last year obviously was, I don't think they scored quite enough goals when Pedro was out the team. He must be on the comeback trail. I don't know if he'll be ready for the start of the season, but how do you see them kind of coping in his absence, probably at the start of the season as well? Have they got enough firepower? Gabigol obviously has gone, although he didn't play loads. They've lost that firepower a little bit as well. Do you think they've got enough to cover that? Loran as well, obviously didn't play a lot, but he's another forward player. So that's the only question, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that is a question, James. Who gets the goals? But I think Pedro, to answer your question, he's coming back in May. He'll be a massive it'll be a massive welcome back for him. And he was going great guns before he got injured. Obviously, he did his ACL, didn't he? I think. Obviously, season-ending injury, but he was doing really well. I mean, he was 11 goals. He's got in Serie A. He got 30 goals in all, and that and he missed quite a lot of the season. Got injured in September. So, imagine if he'd have been fit the whole time, maybe they would have won the title. With his goals. But I think, yeah, that's the only worry. Can they get the goals until he comes back? I think they probably do need to go out and do a little bit more business in the forward areas. They are relying heavily on youth players, really. I mean, you look at it in the regional competitions. They drew on Saturday with Fluminense. And again, it was quite a kind of team that you might see them start the league with. There was Eric Pulgar in the middle. There was Gerson. Michael as well, who came into it on the back of the last season, really scored a few vital goals towards the back end. He got a few goals in, or maybe just the one, but maybe he's got a bigger part to play this time. There's Bruno Henrique as well, who can get a goal. He got 6 in all last season. So they probably need a little bit more. There's Gonzalo Plata as well, the young Ecuadorian fella, who, again, they'll be asking a few more questions of this time. So that's the only kind of question mark. Can they get the goals that Pedro obviously gives them? For me, they need to go out and get some, at least one more kind of player that can put the ball in the net regularly, because those numbers from the rest of the guys up in those higher echelons of the field, they don't seem to be quite doing the business. And like I said, selling the likes of Loran is kind of a bit of a blow, really, for them, I'd say. You've obviously got Everton Arejo as well, the young midfielder who can chip in with a goal here and there as well. So, like I said, they are heavily, focusing on the youth, perhaps. But for me, yeah, they just need one or two more to really. I think they need more from the likes of sort of Nicolas de la Cruz, who came in and was a little bit disappointing last season, to be quite honest, as well. I think they need a lot more from him as well. And Ariceta, the Uruguayan lad as well, who's a number 10 as well. I think they just need a little bit more from those guys, give them a bit more firepower in the goals department. But otherwise, yeah, I think they'll be okay.
Yeah, De La Cruz, I think, scored in his first 2 games and didn't score for the rest of the season, something like that. Worth pointing out that Flamengo did beat Botafogo on Sunday, the 2nd of February, George, in the Super Cup final. So obviously that was the winners of the league against the winners of the Cup. Flamengo won 3-1. They were 3-0 up, actually, with a few minutes left. And it was Bruno Henrique scored a couple in that, one of them being a penalty. So, yeah, he's maybe one who they'll lean on a bit more after a bit of a quieter year. But, yeah, they are one. So Felipe Luis has led them now to 2 trophies, really, which is fair enough. But we'll see how they get on. Well, that was Flamengo, George, a good roundup of them. The final club that we're going to look at is probably the wild card of the 4. And that's my club, George, Inter, the Colorados, who have snuck into this discussion, perhaps at your slight disapproval, perhaps, I think it's fair to say.
I don't think it's a disapproval, James. I think they will do well. As you know, I'm as well as you are. I'm a fan of Mr. Mercado, Mr. Super Mercado. I think he'll, hopefully from your point of view, from Inter's point of view themselves, they hit the ground running again, where they stopped off last season with a marvellous, well, they lost the last few, didn't they? But they had a marvellous unbeaten run in amongst that, and I think they'll be, I sort of thought, will they be? But they probably will be, to be fair. Like you said, who else is kind of going to come through and give the kind of title challenges a go? I think Inter definitely will be. I think Mercado's stock will rise even further still if they do well this season. And what I want to get your initial thought on, James, is I just saw this today. I don't know when it was brought out, but the new shirt, James, looks quite smart. So it's a different shade of red this time for Inter, isn't it? Just a darker shade of red. But just your thoughts on that, if you've got a chance to have a look at it.
Yeah, nice. It looks like a Nottingham Forest shirt, Nottingham Forest kit, basically. But I guess that's that's the colours, isn't it, with the white shorts and the red socks. But yeah, it's not bad. I mean, it's just a standard Adidas kind of template from what I can see. The collar's kind of nice, I guess. But yeah, they've got a new sponsor as well by the looks of things, Alpha. So it looks okay, George. It's nothing special, I don't think. I think, the away kits perhaps, and sometimes these special kits might be more interesting. But yeah, it looks. I mean, Liverpool are going to be Adidas next year, of course, as well. So it'll be similar to that in some ways as well, I guess. But yeah, just if you were squinting at it from an English point of view, you could easily mistake it for a Nottingham Forest kit, and I'm not sure that's to my liking, given what Forest did to us at Anfield earlier this season. But yeah, not bad. It's Inter, isn't it? It's the boys, so yeah, standard kind of red Adidas kit. I'm not complaining with that. But yeah, like you said, they ended the season in such good form. I mean, it was dampened by 3 defeats in a row, the last 3 games, which did put paid to their kind of really run up the table, left them in 5th eventually. So Fortaleza fans are probably the ones who are going to be screaming at us this week, George, and we know we have a few Fortaleza listeners. So maybe they'll surprise us again, but we don't think they'll be in that title picture. So then you're left thinking, well, who could it be? Could Corinthians carry on their run, and maybe they will? Sao Paulo were in the mix as well, like you mentioned before. Gallo are surely going to have a better season than they did last time. Flu might have an eye on things, steadied the ship. But Inter, I think, have that basis with Mercado to really go on and kind of consolidate and do an even better job, go far in the Libertadores. They haven't done a lot of business. I think it's one thing that I will say. They did manage to sign the left back Bernabé, who was on loan from Celtic. I know he was very highly rated. He had a good season with Inter, and they did manage to keep him. And that was about 5 million, I think 5 million euros. It's not an insignificant fee really at this kind of level. So he's obviously a player they really did want. They've signed Kike Rocha from Atletico Paranense, his centre back. Vitinho is another one who's been in Ukraine with Kiev, and he's a former Bragantino, Atletico Paranense player as well. So he might be one to keep an eye on. I think we did mention him a couple of times. He was on loan at Bragantino last couple of years. Vitinho, I think he did a few bits last year, but nothing especially exciting, to be quite truthful, in terms of the incomings, the outgoings. I think the one which catches the eye is Lucas Alario, who's moved back to Argentina with Estudiantes. Didn't really work for him, unfortunately, during his year at Inter. 5 goals in 36 appearances. I think it's fair to say much more was expected of Alario, and he's now left the club. So I think that leaves a bit more kind of emphasis on Rafael Borre, who has actually started pretty well in the regional competition, the Gaucho. He's got 2 goals. Alan Patrick as well, 2 goals, 3 assists. So I think Patrick again is probably going to be a key player for them. Scored quite a few goals last season. Kind of a creative force for Inter. So I think they've managed to keep those players who did shoot them up the table, who kind of put them on that run. And obviously with Mercado fully settled, fully with the backing of the clubs. We know what happened at the start of last season, George, with the Rio Grande do Sul, the tragic, the weather conditions. That, fingers crossed, touch wood, isn't going to happen this year. So that really threw them off. I think any hopes they had of winning anything, I think, were thrown out with that. And then they just had to do the best that they could. And in the end, they still managed to do a very fine job of it. So I think when you put all of that together, you've got to say that they are a bit of a dark horse for the title. Obviously, I'll be, for very obvious reasons, backing them all the way. But what are your thoughts on Inter, having kind of listened to my argument about why I do think that they will be in the mix?
Yeah, I have to kind of agree in a way, James. I think, like you said, that I think they will be. Mercado's got them playing well. Like you said, they've done a little bit of some interesting kind of business here and there. And like you said, Barambi, he had a sort of a star role, didn't he, in the end last season? So he that was a good little signing. Vitinho did play for RB Bragantino last season. He was on loan from there from Dynamo Kiev. So yeah, he so he's a decent. I think he scored a couple of. I think he scored a goal, hasn't he? The other day potentially. Last week. he scored a goal, his first goal for them in the regional competitions. So yeah, look, it's and Ramon as well, like you said, from Olympiacos is an interesting one as well. So some interesting signings. They've got, like I said, Boré, they might lean on a little bit more. Like I said, it didn't quite work out for Alero, which was a shame, really, because he came with a bit of stock from Europe, didn't he, the season before. And also they've got Wesley, who was quite a heavy goal scorer for them last season. He got a little bit excited, didn't he, towards the end of it, thinking they were going to win it, but it didn't happen in the end. So, yeah, I accept your argument for whether Inter will go up and challenge. And I must say, I probably agree with you, James. They'll definitely be up and around there. Like you said, I think the disaster did hit them a little bit. Obviously, it did hit them hard, and it obviously was a massive factor to why they didn't start very well. So, like, you always back them, to be fair, to do better and come better. So, fair play, you were right. I can't see any reason why you won't be right about them challenging this season either.
Yeah, I think a good barometer of where they are will be how they do in the Gaucho this summer, because they haven't won it for, I think, 9 years or something, since 2016. And obviously, given that it's mainly really them and Gremio, Juventude are in there as well, and a couple of smaller teams, but they haven't won it for such a long time. Is not a good sign, really, for a club as big as Inter. They should, when it's a 2-horse race, pretty much you back them to win it every other year, really, but they haven't been doing that. So if they can win it this year in the build up to the season, I think that would be a big boost for them as well. And I think they will do that. I don't think Gremio are anything really to write home about, although they weren't last year and they still won it as well. So they've got a new manager as well, actually, haven't they? They did go and get one in the end, Gustavo Quinteros. I'm just having a look. So Renato Gaucho, George, is out, but that's a tale for another day. But yeah, that kind of wraps up the 4, really. So Botafogo, Palmeiras, Flamengo, and Inter, all looking in decent shape. Just before we go, George, I did mention a few kind of other sides who might be throwing their hat into the ring. Who's your wildcard pick? If you've got to pick one, so we're nailing these 4 as our contenders. Who's your one wildcard choice and why, just very briefly?
Well, you're backing your team, James. I'm going to back my team as a wild card. I think, as you know, there are a few managers that I like in this, in the Brazilian sort of sphere. Cuca is definitely one of them, and he is back in management after leaving Atletico Paranaense last season. He's back with Galo, and I'm quite excited about this, to be quite honest with you, James. And I think that they'll do well this time round. I think they will. They've obviously sacked Milito, who didn't have the best of seasons in all. Like I said, towards the top end of this episode, they hung their hat on the cup competitions. It didn't work for them, and now they've got a real experienced coach at the helm. They've bought him well, like we've mentioned as well. So far, they've kept the likes of Hulk and everything. I know they lost Paulino, but Hulk is a big talisman for them, and he'll be looking for another better season than he did have in the end last time, and they will collectively. I think there might be an outside option for at least for the Libertadores, but that would see them challenge also for the title for me as well. So I'm going to go with Galo as my kind of wild card pick.
Yeah, fair enough. I think that's probably many people are probably looking at Galo and thinking they might do a better job this season. I'm going to go for Corinthians. I think obviously they did end the season brilliantly last year with Ramon Diaz overseeing things with Depay and Yuri Alberto really dovetailing nicely. Despite everything, George, Yuri Alberto is still there. I think he's surely probably going to leave in the summer, but January is a difficult market in Europe sometimes, so that they can at least count on him for the start of the season. Angel Romero as well is still there, and he was important as well. Rodrigo Garro is still there as well. I think they've not done any business particularly, but they haven't lost any of those key players, and they've started pretty well in the kind of the the Paulista as well. So I think they're going to be one to kind of watch much more towards the top of the table rather than the bottom where they were for a long time last season. So I would keep an eye on Corinthians if I were you, George.
Yeah, well, no, I definitely will, James. Like you said, they did well to keep hold of likes of Yuri Alberto and Garo and others maybe as well. And obviously Memphis Depay did a really good job of, towards the end of last season and kind of, elevated them up from, like you said, the lower positions of the Brasileirão, which they were in for the most part of the season. And yeah, I think you're right. I think Corinthians definitely will be up and around there. The manager, of course, Ramon Diaz, is vastly experienced as well, did a great job. It wasn't just all on, the likes of Yuri Alberto and Memphis Depay. He still had to coach them into that really good bit of form that they hit, didn't they, towards the back end of last season. So, yeah, it's a good pick again, I think.
Yeah, let's see. They'll certainly be in and around it, I would imagine. So, George, that wraps up those contenders. I hope everybody's a little bit more clued up as to what's been going on with the bigger sides in Brazil over the winter ahead of the season. We've still got shows to do, George, before the season kicks off. We've still got a little while. So what are we going to look at next week, do you think? I can't remember what we said.
Well, I think it's now a season preview, James. I think we're going to do a 4-part preview. So we're going to look at 5 teams a week. And that's going to lead us up to the start, pretty much there or thereabouts, of the Brasileirão season. So now we're looking at every single team one by one. I don't know how you want to do it, but I think I would suggest we maybe do it in a kind of potentially a chronological order. But yeah, let's do it that way. So we'll have a look and see where we can start. Obviously, then we're starting with, if we look at it next week, we'd start with Galo, Bahia, Fogo, and Bragantino and Ceará.
Yeah.
So if we look at Galo, Bahia, Fogo, RB Bragantino, and Ceará would be the first 5.
Well, it depends. I mean, Red Bull Bragantino's an R, really, isn't it? But if you want to be technical about it, I think.
Well, you have a look at it and see, but that I'm just going off, what Globo have it, and they have it in chronological. Yeah, so I'm just going off that, really. But
we'll defer to Globo then. We'll defer to Globo. Let's do it that way. So 5 teams, unless we do 4, just because it might take a bit long, and I think that would leave us an extra week. So if we did 4 per week, it would be 5 weeks.
So let's do it like that then, if you like. Yeah,
that might just give us a little bit more leeway, because I know it can be a bit of a rush if we're trying to do 5. We've done 4 today, and it does take time to get through them. Yeah, so we've looked at Fogo today, but we'll look at them again next week. So Galo, Bahia, Fogo, and Bragantino will be the 4 that we look at next week, followed by Ceará, Corinthians, Cruzeiro, and Flamengo. So yeah, lots to get into still before we start the season. Anybody has any questions about or anything they want to hear before the start of the season, then just let us know. We'll see what we can cover. In the meantime, George, there's nothing to enjoy in terms of factual football in Brazil, but we're on the way, aren't we?
Yeah, we're nearly there, James. It's another week down. It's another good episode down as well. Everybody enjoy it. And what we will say is adios, and we will see you next week. Enjoy it. It's nearly there.
It just kept going, didn't it? I'm waiting to put it in. So it's coming soon. So enjoy it.
Yeah. Well, it's really there, isn't it?